Fashion accessories will come and go, but I don't see that happening to tote bags any soon. As you can remember, I already shared with you how to make this simple tote bag, and today I'm showing you how to make a drawstring tote bag. This one measures 15 inches in length, 13 inches in width, and it has a depth of 4 inches. Now let's see what are the materials and tools to complete this fun project. I'm going to start with the fabric measurements. For the outside, we need a fabric piece measuring 16 by 16 inches, and for both sides, we are going to need 2 from that. Then for the lining, we need 2 fabric pieces measuring the same as the outside fabric piece, 16 by 16 inches. If you would like, you can also use fusible fleece for this project to give a bit of steadiness. For bag handles, you can either use webbings or you can use your own straps like I do. For that, we need 2 fabric pieces, each measuring 4 by 26 inches. Now this is a drawstring bag, so you're going to need some kind of string, ribbon, or even thin fabric strap. Work with what you have in hand, and I'm using a cotton household twine. You will need 2 separate pieces, each measuring 44 inches in length. All the fabrics I'm using here are pre-washed and ironed cotton fabric. Other than these, you'll need pins or clips, a fabric marking pen, a large safety pin to enter the twine at the end, a pair of scissors, a measuring tape or ruler, and finally your sewing machine with the coordinating thread color. Now let's start with the fabric pieces for the straps, one piece at a time. First, place the fabric facing the wrong side up and then fold it in half. You can hand press it or iron it over to keep a proper crease. Move the iron from one end to the other. Then unfold the fabric and you can see a clear crease in the middle now. Then fold the both halves, touching the midline, and press it tightly. You can then fold over the whole thing again, and this time I'm going to iron it over to keep a fine crease. Finally, use a couple of pins to hold the fold and follow the same steps for the other fabric piece as well to make your second strap. After that, we are going to sew along the both open and closed ends of each piece to make these into permanent straps. Sew one strap at a time, and first I'm going to sew along the open end of one strap. Leave a 1/4 inch or less seam allowance and do a little back stitch at the beginning. You only have to sew straight and remove any pins in your way while doing so. Even though I'm using cotton fabric for both outside and lining fabric pieces, this particular one for the outside fabric is something you called woven cotton. It's thicker and less stretchy compared to the regular cotton fabric, which makes it ideal for making tote bags and straps like these. It will also give your project a bit of weight and strength. When you reach the end of that margin, do a little back stitch to end the sewing and finally trim the thread. Now move on to the other margin and sew along that one like we did with the first one. Same goes for the second fabric strap as well. Sew both margins leaving a 1/4 inch or less seam allowance. Using webbings as handle is always an option. Just go ahead and skip these parts if you are not up for this. At this point, both straps are ready, and let's keep these aside for a moment and move on to the next step. Take 2 fabric pieces for the outside of the bag and keep them facing right sides up. We need to mark several points and lines before moving forward. Starting with one outside fabric piece, Mark 2 inches down from the top at one end of the fabric. Use your ruler and a fabric marking pen. Then from that marked point, leave 1 inch down and mark that point as well. Now move the ruler to the other end and make those same points by following the same steps. First mark 2 inches from the top, then mark 1 inch down from the first marked point. After that, connect those points by simply drawing 2 lines. First, align the 2 top points using a ruler and then draw a simple line connecting each other. Make sure to draw firm lines so you can see these lines clearly when it comes to top stitching. Do the same with the 2 points below it. Draw a line connecting those 2 points as well. After drawing both lines, turn the fabric from one of the ends and leave a mark at those previously marked 2 points at the wrong side of the fabric as well. I forgot to tell you about my fabric marking pen. This is a heat erasable fabric marking pen, and I can get rid of these markings easily by simply giving a heat press at the end. Do the same at the other end too. You don't need to draw any lines or anything. Just mark those 2 basic points as a guide. After you are done with one outside piece, follow the same steps for the other outside piece as well. There is an easy way to do that. First, place the other piece on top of the first one and the right sides facing up. Make sure both pieces are aligning with each other before going any further. Now, using the marked points on the first one as a guide, mark the points on the second fabric piece. Then draw lines and mark points on the wrong side as well, like we did with the first one. These may seem a lot of work only because I'm explaining everything in detail. But I promise you, once you start to do it, it's not going to be a big deal. All the markings are now in place, and now let's move to the next step, which is attaching the straps. Take one outer fabric piece and one of the straps out of 2. To attach the strap, first we need to have an idea where we're going to place the strap. For that, mark 4 inches away from both ends of the top margin. That way we can place both strap ends equally spaced. Now place the 2 ends of the straps inside of those 4-inch marked points. I may have mentioned this a couple of times. I usually make a capital letter U shape out of the strap when placing it. Then you won't be having any twisted straps at the end. Next, place one of the lining fabric pieces on top and align with the outer fabric piece. The important thing is the right sides of the 2 fabric pieces need to face each other. Now clip or pin along the top margin, keeping outer fabric, strap and the lining fabric in place. I usually leave a little bit of strap part hanging outside whenever I attach any straps. Make sure strap ends are in that previously marked point and then use a clip or a pin to hold everything together. Follow the same steps for the remaining outside fabric, strap and the lining fabric piece as well. It's like making a fabric sandwich. Once both are done separately, you can sew along the top margins, one margin at a time. You just have to sew straight along the margin, leaving a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Don't forget to do a little back stitch at the beginning. When you are sewing the strap ends, first remove the clip or pin and then sew straight while holding everything in place. Because this is a medium-sized tote bag, you have to handle more fabric area. So make sure to use enough clips or pins when working with it. Small things like these actually matter when it comes to making a good-looking bag. Once you reach the other end, do a little back stitch and finally trim the thread. Same goes for the second one, and at this point both are ready, and as you can see, both straps are properly attached. Now let's move to the next step. First, unfold one of the pieces and lay flat that one facing the right side up. Next, unfold the other piece and place that one on top and align with the first piece. There are two important things you need to consider here. First, the right sides of both pieces need to face each other. Second, you need to align the two outside pieces together and two lining fabric pieces together. You can't interchange it. After you check those, start to clip or pin all around the two pieces, starting with the two seam ends at the middle. This will help to align everything smoothly. Make sure to spread the seams open while you are doing so. After aligning two basic ends, you can then clip all the way around to keep the two fabric layers in place. Now this next step only applies if you need a box tote bag. If not, you can skip this part completely. There are two basic ways to do this, but I'm only showing you one way here. To make box corners, first you need to remove 4 square shapes from all 4 corners. 2 from the outside fabric bag end and 2 from the lining fabric bag end. I'm going to remove 2 by 2 inch squares, but you can change the measurements as you like. It depends on how much depth you need for your tote bag. As for myself, by using 2 by 2 inch squares, I'll get a depth of 4 inches at the end. Change your measurements according to that. Once all 4 corner squares are removed, we are ready to assemble the bag. At this stage, you need to keep some areas sewn and some areas unsewn. Let me show you how. You need to sew the 2 bottom ends of the outside and lining bag. When it comes to the sides of the outside bag, leave the area in between the 2 marked points on both sides unsewn. Moving on to the lining fabric side, mark 3 to 4 inch of space at one of the 2 sides. We are going to leave this space unsewn as well, and this is for turning the right side out at the end. In summary, leave this area, 2 areas on the outside fabric, and box corners at the 4 ends unsewn. Let's start to sew one of the sides, and I'm going to leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Starting from the outside fabric area, do a little back stitch at the beginning. Then sew straight until you reach the first marked point. At that point, do a little back stitch to securely stop the sewing for now. You don't need to trim the thread here. You can just raise the foot and move the fabric to your next marked point by leaving that area unsewn. Again, lower the foot at the next marked point and start to sew from that point onwards and do a little back stitch to secure your stitches. Keep sewing straight, and we are now at the lining fabric area. As you can remember, we have another 2 marked points there, and stop the sewing when you reach the first marked point. Do a little back stitch to end it. Again, you don't need to trim the thread here. Just raise the foot and move the fabric to the other marked point. From there on, start to sew straight, leaving the area in between the two marked points unsewn. Do a little backstitch at the beginning. Keep sewing until you reach the end of that side, and don't forget to do a little backstitch at the end. Finally, trim the thread. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to leave the box corners unsewn for now, and let's move on to the bottom margin of the lining fabric bag. There is nothing special on that. You can just sew straight, and that applies for the bottom margin of the outside bag as well. Remember to do a little backstitch at the beginning and at the ending. I don't think it's necessary to show you how to sew the other side of the bag in detail, since I showed you one of the sides. When it comes to that side, you only have to leave the area in between the two marked points on the outside fabric unsewn. Now when you're sewing around the bag, make sure the straps are not in your way. That'll be a problem otherwise. After sewing all four sides, leaving the required areas unsewn, our next step is going to be sewing the box corners at all four ends. Let's start with one of the corners. Spread open the corner and then align the seams on two sides together like this. You can then sew that area straight, but before that use a pin or a clip to keep everything in place. We are going to sew along this area in a moment. Follow the same steps for the remaining three corners. First, pin and place everything before you start sewing. Next, one by one sew all four box corners, leaving a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remember to do a little backstitch at the beginning and at the ending. At this point, all four corners are ready and everything is coming together nicely so far. Adding a bit of depth to a tote bag is always a good idea, especially if you are carrying a lot of stuff. Now moving on to the next step, it's time to turn the right side out using the opening we left at the lining fabric bag. As I always remind you, don't rush things whenever you are turning the right side out of any project. The extra pressure might loosen the stitches at the opening end. So just take your time, and if you have left enough space, this step won't be a problem for you. Make sure to poke out the pointy ends at all corners. You can do it with your hands or use a small rod to poke out hard corners. This will happen if you use fusible fleece, so make sure everything is out before moving on to the next step. Now it's time to enclose the opening we left at the lining fabric bag. First, hand press the seams at that area towards the inside, like the way I do. Then use a few pins or clips to keep things in place. After that, we are going to top stitch along that area, enclosing the opening we left. You need to sew closer to the margin and do a little back stitch at the beginning. Sew straight until you reach the other end of the opening. Do a little back stitch at the end and trim all threads. We are only a few more steps away and now enter the lining bag into the outside bag. Hand press along the opening of the bag where the outside and lining bag connects. We are going to sew along this opening in a moment, and to make that easier, use a few clips or pins along the opening end of the bag. This will help to keep outside fabric out and lining fabric in. Hope you understand what I mean. Now starting at any point, top stitch along the opening end by leaving a 1/4 inch or less seam allowance. Slow down a bit when sewing the two thicker seam ends to keep your stitching smoother. Remove the clips as you go and you need to move the bag along while sewing. This step also helps to give extra strength to the straps as well. Stop the sewing once you reach the starting point and do a little back stitch to securely end the sewing. Finally, trim all threads and now the tote bag is all ready. Our next step is to make this into a drawstring tote bag, and for that you need to make a fabric tunnel. That is where those previously drawn lines come into play. At this point, we have two continuous lines around the bag which came from the two outside fabric pieces. First, we are going to top stitch all the way around the top line. But before doing that, first check the two openings at the both ends, and I usually try to spread the seams apart and towards the inside before starting any sewing. When it comes to sewing, removing the toolbox part of your sewing machine will make things easier since we can then freely move the bag while sewing. You can go ahead and start to sew at any point of the top line. Start with doing a little back stitch and then sew straight while moving the bag along. When it comes to sewing closer to the two openings, again make sure the seams are inside and spread apart. I'm not sure if you noticed this, but I didn't do any ironing once I drew these lines. If you used a heat erasable fabric marking pen like I did, you're gonna lose these markings if you did any heat press. So please keep that in mind and draw it over firmly in case you can't see the lines clearly. Do a little back stitch when you reach the starting point and you can end the sewing there. These same steps go for the other drawn line below, and this is how you make a fabric tunnel to insert the two strings at the end. There is no more sewing after this point and you can give yourself a break now. Then heat press the tote bag to get rid of those fabric marks and to give it a nice finishing look. We are finally at the last step of this project, and it's time to insert the two strings using the two unsewn openings. Let's start with one twine at a time. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm using household twine and it has a reasonable thickness in it. Because of that, I can easily pin one end of the twine to the safety pin. Now insert the safety pin with the twine attached through one of the openings on one side. I have seen there are specialized tools for this purpose rather than a simple safety pin. But this is what I have in hand, and most importantly, it does the job. Then push and pull it through the fabric tunnel until you reach the other end of that side. When you reach the other end, move over to the other side through the fabric tunnel and continue pushing and pulling until you reach the other end of that side. Make sure a part of the twine stays outside. Don't let the entire thing slip through the tunnel. Once you reach the other end of that side, pull the safety pin out from the opening end. Pull the twine towards you and you can now remove the safety pin from the twine. Make sure the two ends of the twine at the outside are equal in length and then make a tight knot using the two ends. Trim the unnecessary parts out and follow the same steps for the other twine piece as well. Now to be more clear, if you insert the first twine from the left side of the bag, you need to insert the second twine from the right side of the bag. I might not need to tell you all these simple things, but I had these questions when I was a beginner. So I hope these simple tips will help you too. Even though I use twine, you can use ribbon, thin fabric stripe like binding tape to work as strings when making a drawstring bag. At this point, we are done attaching both strings for our bag, and for this particular twine, I can apply a bit of hot glue or burn the ends like the old-fashioned way to stop the fray. Drawstring bags are more fashionable than a simple tote bag, and I also believe it's not everyone's cup of tea. But it will surely keep the things safe inside because you can keep it closed by simply drawing the two strings at the end. I must warn you, it's so much fun and you will easily get addicted to these bags. I hope you'll give it a try and leave a comment to share your thoughts as well. Thank you all for watching and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye for now and I'll join you with another fun project.